Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we find ourselves standing barefoot in the dry breath of a desert morning. The sun has not risen yet, but it's already here humming in the sand, waiting in your bones, tightening your skin like yesterday's sweat. There's a rope in your hand. It's frayed. It smells like goats and fear. Ahead of you, there's a limestone block the size of a camel and roughly as forgiving. And today, like yesterday, and tomorrow you'll be dragging it somewhere uphill. Slowly. Inevitably. Probably while someone yells, "No, you're not a Pharaoh. Not even close. You're not a slave either, despite what the myths say. You're a conscripted labourer, half paid in beer and very mild hope. And today, like most days, your sandals have given up. The rope burns your palm, and the wind, when it shows up, only exists to throw sand into your mouth at exactly the wrong time. You think pyramids are about precision, eternity, and the mystery of the afterlife. That's charming. But for you, it's about splinters, sunstroke, and the deeply personal grudge your back seems to hold against the gods. You don't build grandeur. You haul it, sweat on it, and occasionally cry into it, quietly. So, before you settle in, please take a moment to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you're truly enjoying the journey. You can also leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always a small wonder to see people tuning in from so many corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum in the background, and together, let's ease into tonight's story. You do not wake up, you are awakened by the overseer's stick thudding against the reed wall like an angry mosquito the size of a man. Your eyes are already gritty with sand you never invited inside. The mat beneath you smells faintly of old sweat, wet straw, and defeat. There's no blanket. There's no pillow. There's no mercy. You sit up slowly, but not too slowly. A few heartbeats too long, and that stick will be visiting your ribs. Again, you stretch, which really means flinch, and blink into the half-light of a world already warm. Not cozy warm. Not blanket warm. This is the kind of warmth that suggests the sun is hunting you, personally, and has been since the last dynasty. You step outside. There is no door, only a ragged flap of woven reed that slaps your shoulder with a wet thwomp as you pass. The air smells like dust, smoke, and the kind of body odour that has committed to its lifestyle. Maybe you'll get used to it. You won't. You never do. Breakfast is not waiting. You line up like a herd of resigned goats, clutching your clay cup like it holds redemption. It doesn't. It holds beer. Not the good kind. It's lukewarm, thick, and full of things that probably qualify as insects. Still, it's safer than Nile water. Nile water, which tastes like wet socks and possibly ancient curses. You sip, chew, swallow. You do not enjoy, you ingest. This is nourishment in the way sand is seasoning only because there's no other choice. Then comes the bread. A chunk of something between a brick and a chew toy. Dense, slightly burnt, and sprinkled generously with sand. Not because it's spiced that way, no. That's just the grinding stones doing their best to sabotage your molars. You bite carefully. Not to savour. To survive. Maybe you dreamed of dates, figs, or honey last night. That's sweet. You get wheat paste and fermented regret. Then, someone yells. They're always yelling. It's unclear if they actually know your name or just enjoy shouting things like move, and faster. As if volume is a management strategy. You shuffle with the others, joining the long trail of labourers like ants dragging their oversized burdens. The sun is higher now, bloated and smirking, turning the sand into a slow cooking oven that roasts your ankles as you walk. Your feet are already blistered, your tunic already soaked. You itch, constantly, from sweat, from fleas, from sand that somehow has opinions. You squint ahead and there it is. Your task, a block of limestone the size of your house, waiting to be dragged uphill. The rope has seen too many hands and not enough repairs. Maybe today it'll break. Maybe today your back will break first. And maybe, just maybe, you'll get a longer sip of beer at midday. But no, that's optimism. And optimism is for scribes, priests, and people who don't have to carry eternity one stone at a time. The rope is older than you. That's not an exaggeration. You are 15. The rope is maybe 20. It's rough, split in places. It smells like every sweaty hand that's ever touched it, which, judging by the smell, includes camels, dead fish, and the spirit of despair. You wrap it around your shoulder, because holding it with your hands means blisters. Of course, dragging it across your collarbone means blisters too. Just different ones. The limestone block doesn't care. It sits there, massive and indifferent, like a royal official at a peasant's funeral. You grunt. Everyone grunts. Together you pull. The sound of sandals scraping against the sand is drowned out by the scrape of rock against wooden rollers. It sounds like the earth itself groaning in protest. The ramp ahead isn't even a proper slope. It's a prayer disguised as architecture. Wooden beams creak beneath the weight, packed mud crumbles at the edges, and the incline rises like it's auditioning for a mountain range. You think about asking if there's an easier path. Then you remember. Asking questions is a good way to get volunteered for stone chiseling duty. With your face. You expected engineering marvels, precision blocks, perfectly leveled ramps. Instead, what you get is a slightly tilted pile of sweat, splinters, and angry geometry. Your legs begin to shake, not dramatically, just enough to let you know that the concept of standing might be optional soon. A man next to you coughs something out of his lungs that might have once been a small animal. He doesn't stop pulling. Someone slips. The block lurches. For a moment, the rope digs into your neck like it wants to remind you who's boss. You bite your tongue not for discipline, but because that's what happens when your face slams forward against your own arm. Still, the overseer blows his whistle. Not to stop you. Oh no, to remind you that this is your pace now. The pace of the stone. The pace of death, possibly. The pace of ambition written in other people's dreams. You reach the halfway point. Maybe. No one tells you. You look up and see how far there still is to go. The pyramid looms above, incomplete and hulking, like someone tried to stack the sky into neat geometry and got bored halfway. You are a speck, helping the sun block out the horizon one miserable slab at a time. The wind picks up. Not gently. This isn't a breeze. This is a punishment wearing sandals made of grit. Sand stings your eyes, gets into your teeth, your ears, the folds of your tunic, your soul. You spit. It's dry. You cough. It echoes. Then, a miracle. Not divine. Just a man with a clay jug and a tired arm. Water. Not clean. Not cold, but wet. And right now, that's enough to bring tears to your sand-scoured eyes. You take a sip. It tastes like hope's leftovers. Then the whistle again. The rope again. The weight again. There's no glory here. Just gravity, repetition, and a pyramid that doesn't care who finishes it, only that someone does. You'd think that, after dragging a rock large enough to intimidate a camel, someone might offer a feast, or at least a second helping. But no. Lunch comes not with fanfare nor flavour. It arrives in a splintered basket passed down a line of sunburned shoulders and cracked fingers. Inside are three things: bread, more bread, and the promise that one day there might be something not bread. That day is not today. You take your piece. It's warm, but not in the comforting way. More in the way of it was sitting in the sun because nobody cared to cover it. The crust is hard. Not firm. Hard, like deflect an arrow hard. The inside is chewy in the way that suggests either it's fresh or it's been rained on once and dried out again. Honestly, you don't want to know. You chew. Slowly. Not because you're savouring. Because your jaw hurts. Because the sand in the bread is doing its best impression of a dentist with anger management issues. Somewhere in your molars you feel the unmistakable crunch of grit. It is not flour. It is not seasoning. It is simply the daily reminder that the grinding stones hate you. Someone nearby has an onion. A whole one. They're eating it raw, like it's an apple, and they're starring in a tragedy. You think about asking for a bite. But they are bigger than you. Hungrier than you. Probably meaner than you. So you pretend your mouth isn't watering. It is. but only out of betrayal. Then comes the beer. Again, don't get excited. This isn't grab a cold one beer. This is lukewarm cereal water in a clay cup that smells like mold and poor choices. Still, it's better than the Nile, which, as you now know, is essentially a liquid petting zoo. You sip. It coats your mouth in a film of grainy foam and ancient yeast. You try to think of it as nourishment. You fail. But it has calories, and calories are currency. So you swallow and nod like it helped. Maybe you'll get a date, not the romantic kind. The fruit. The wrinkled, overly sweet, vaguely sticky kind that's been rolling around someone's satchel since last equinox. But no, not today. Today is bread and beer. Again. As always, you don't talk during lunch, not because it's sacred, but because it hurts to open your mouth wider than necessary, because flies swarm the moment food appears, because talking feels like effort, and you've spent all your effort dragging a piece of someone else's afterlife up a ramp built from spite. You sit in the shade of a boulder that might someday be part of a pharaoh's tomb. For now, it's just a rock. And you, despite all evidence to the contrary, are still a person. A hungry, sand-coated, slowly dehydrating person with bread in your teeth and regret in your spine. You finish your meal, if it can be called that. You dust your hands on your tunic. The sand clings anyway. It always does. Then the whistle. Of course. The sun doesn't climb. It lunges. By the time you've licked the last crumbs of disappointment from your fingers, it's already pressing down on your scalp like a hot, invisible fist. There's no such thing as shade on the worksite, just degrees of being slowly roasted. You try to find the smallest patch of shadow under the edge of a cartwheel. It's already claimed by a dog who refuses to move. You do not win the argument. Back to work. The stone hasn't moved itself while you were gone. You hoped, briefly, that someone might have helped drag it further up the ramp while you were eating. They did not. In fact, someone tied the rope in a new way that now seems designed specifically to confuse and chafe. You take your position again. Right shoulder, back straight, breath steady. That's the theory anyway. In practice, your shoulder is already bruised. Your back is a tapestry of knots and regrets. And your breath tastes like old bread and dust. You lean into the rope. It fights you like a stubborn god. The ramp is now hotter than it was before lunch. That makes sense. Everything is hotter. The rock, the air, your skin, the thoughts in your head. You'd swear your knees are sweating a physiological betrayal you didn't know was possible. Even the flies have slowed down, dazed by the heat, but still determined to land on your eyeball at least once every 5 minutes. You hear a crack. It's not your rope. It's your neck. You turn to glance behind you and immediately regret it. The glare off the limestone nearly blinds you. Your vision swims with shapes that might be birds, or hallucinations, or very enthusiastic flies. You blink. The birds do not leave. Then, a shout. Someone dropped a chisel. Someone else dropped their entire lunch. Someone else dropped to the ground. The overseer yells at all three, in that order. No one moves to help the one who fell. You glance again. He's breathing. That's enough. You resume pulling. The stone creaks. Or maybe the ramp does. Or maybe it's your spine again. It's all a symphony of near collapse. You try to distract yourself with thoughts, but the only thought that comes is, why are we doing this again? Religion? Afterlife? Royal vanity? You've heard it all. That each block brings the Pharaoh closer to eternity, that your work is sacred, that this is part of a cosmic plan. None of that matters right now. Right now, you're sweating so much your feet squelch inside your sandals, which, by the way, are now more string than shoe. Another step, another pull. Another moment where the sun leans in just a little closer, as if it's whispering, you'll never be done. You pause to wipe your face. The rag in your belt is wetter than your face. Useless. You wring it out and try again. Now it just smells worse. Then someone says it's almost time for the next water break. You don't believe them. You never do. But you pull anyway. Because maybe this time they're telling the truth. Maybe. You've never seen the overseer sweat. Not really. He stands in the sun like it owes him money. His tunic is cleaner than yours, his sandals somehow intact, and he carries a stick that has never been used for walking. It's not even a very good stick. Slightly crooked, slightly splintered. But it's his, and more importantly, it's everyone else's problem. He doesn't lift anything. That's beneath him. He doesn't pull, push, dig, or carry. He points. And when pointing fails to motivate, he yells. His voice is a weapon honed by years of shouting over rocks, donkeys, wind, and the will to live. It's sharp, it's loud, and somehow it always finds you. You don't know his name. No one does. He might have one, or maybe he gave it up years ago in exchange for the power to shout full sentences without breathing. You try to avoid eye contact, because eye contact invites attention. And attention means instructions, and instructions are just another word for punishment. One of your crew fumbles the rope. A hand slips. A knot comes undone. The stone jolts back a finger's length. Nothing breaks, but the overseer reacts like someone set the king's beard on fire. He storms over, gesturing wildly, accusing everyone and no one. He yells about laziness, about discipline, about honor and geometry, and the disgrace of being slower than a donkey tied to a sack of wet onions. You're not sure that's a real insult, but it stings anyway. You nod. Everyone nods. No one talks back. That's the first rule. Second rule, if he asks, do you understand? You say yes, even if you don't. Especially if you don't. There is no third rule. Only fear. He inspects the stone like it has offended him personally. He kicks one of the rollers. Yells at the roller. Yells at the ground. Yells at the air. Eventually, satisfied that his voice has conquered all living things within earshot, he marches away in search of someone else to terrify. You don't relax. Relaxing implies there was ever a moment when your shoulders weren't locked in a permanent state of please don't let him see me. You just resume. The block lurches forward again. The rope digs in deeper. The sun watches from above, possibly applauding the overseer's performance. You once thought becoming an overseer sounded good. Less lifting, more control, better food, probably. Then you notice the bags under his eyes, the lines in his face, the way he mutters to himself when he thinks no one's listening. You realize the stick is less a symbol of power and more a way to keep his own panic from falling out of his chi. He was you once, a boy hauling stones with a crooked back and bleeding hands. Somewhere along the way, he learned to yell instead. Maybe it helps. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just what happens when the pyramid gets inside your bones and starts rearranging who you are. But right now you don't have time for philosophy. You just need to keep pulling. Before he comes back, your tools are not elegant. They are not sacred instruments passed down from artisan to artisan. They are rocks and sticks. And occasionally a copper chisel so dull it might as well be a spoon. Every morning you're handed the same battered set, mallet, chisel, maybe a lever, and a vague wish that today they won't betray you. The mallet is wooden, supposedly tamarisk, though it feels more like termite leftovers. The handle has splinters, not just one, a colony. Every time you swing it, there's a new sharp surprise waiting for your palm. The chisel is copper soft, easily dented, and shaped like someone made it while blindfolded and angry. You sharpen it against stone. It resents you for this. You don't get gloves. You get calluses. And blisters under the calluses. The hammering starts as a rhythm, steady and reliable, like a heartbeat. By midday, it's a staccato of curses and mistricks, of flying chips and crushed thumbs. And of you wondering if your left index finger has always bent like that. When you chip away at the limestone, you imagine sculptors in temples' clean hands, fine tools, incense in the air. What you have is dust in your eyes, grit in your teeth, and the constant sensation that your own sweat is trying to blind you. You squint anyway, and hammer, and chip, and repeat. You expected precision, maybe some geometry. Instead, you are told make it flatter by a man who couldn't draw a square if his lunch depended on it. You're not shaping art. You're just smashing stubbornness into submission and hoping it looks vaguely rectangular when you're done. The levers don't help. They're logs. Just logs. You wedge one under a block, lean into it with all your weight, and hope it moves. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it breaks. Sometimes the log rolls back and hits your shin so hard you invent a new word for pain, and then forget how to walk for a few minutes. The worst part isn't the pain, though. It's the repetition. Hammer, chip, dust, wipe, repeat. Every day, every hour, every minute. A loop so tight you could use it as a noose. The sun moves. You don't. The shadows lengthen. Your posture shortens. Your knees crackle every time you stand up, like dry reeds underfoot. And yet if you pause too long, someone notices. Not always the overseer. Sometimes it's just another worker whose only remaining joy is passing attention sideways so it doesn't fall on him. So you pretend you're busy. You poke the stone again. You sharpen the chisel again. You hit the same corner for the third time and hope no one notices you've already done it. You think maybe one day there'll be a better tool. One that slices stone like butter and doesn't require you to barter a finger every afternoon. But then again, you also thought the bread this morning wouldn't be mouldy. And here we are. There's a moment somewhere between the 6th bucket of sweat and the 50th tug on the same piece of rope when the world tilts. Not dramatically, just a little. Just enough to make you question if the pyramid is leaning, or if your brain has finally boiled into something more fluid than thought. You blink. The stone is still there. The rope is still fraying. The overseer is still yelling, somewhere in the distance, like a particularly committed mosquito with a clipboard. But things feel strange. You shake your head. Bad idea. Your brain slushes in protest. Everything is sticky: your skin, your tunic, your eyelids. Even your hair, which hasn't been properly washed since last festival season, clings to your scalp like it's afraid of the sun. You start imagining things. A breeze, for instance. A cool, gentle whisper of air that sneaks in from the Nile. It doesn't exist, of course, but you imagine it anyway. Then you imagine a date palm. You're under it. There's shade. Someone hands you a bowl of lentils with garlic. The bowl is real pottery, not a half-broken shard. The lentils are warm. No, hot. No, wait, that's your foot. Your foot is on fire. Not literally, but close enough. You look down. The sand beneath your sandals is the temperature of boiled honey. It's soft now, like walking on regret. Every step squelches. You feel your willpower leaking out through your heels. If motivation had a flavor, it would now taste like salted foot. Someone beside you starts laughing. You glance over. They're staring at the pyramid, giggling quietly, like the stone told a joke. You don't ask. You just nod. That feels safer. Safer than asking why their eyebrows are twitching independently. Mid-shift madness, they call it. Not officially. There's no scroll about it, but everyone knows. It hits around the hottest point of the day, when your body gives up on hope, your mind unhooks from reality, and everything becomes slightly more ridiculous than it should. You once saw a man try to dig through a limestone block with a chicken bone. Said the gods told him there was water inside. There wasn't. There was just limestone. And disappointment. Someone else claimed the Pharaoh's name spelled backward summoned rain. He tried it 3 times before being escorted gently but firmly to the shade. By 2 concerned workers and 1 indifferent goat. You, though, you stay quiet. You chew your tongue a little to stay focused. You press your palm against the nearest stone. It's hot enough to sizzle lentils. You consider laying your head against it just to see what happens. Then, a water call. Blessed, muddy salvation. You shuffle toward the jug, bumping elbows with people who no longer care about elbows or anything, really. You sip. It tastes like ancient sandals and slightly used optimism, but it's wet. Someone mutters that it's almost time for a break. You don't check. Time has stopped meaning anything. The sun has eaten the clocks. You turn back to the ramp. The stone hasn't moved. Of course it hasn't. You weren't assigned your work team. You were absorbed into it, like bread into stale beer, not by choice, but by proximity, routine, and the quiet understanding that none of you are escaping. There are 6 of you, maybe 7. Hard to tell sometimes. One of the men only speaks in sighs, and another might be asleep with his eyes open, or dead, but probably just resting. Your closest co-worker is a man named Hapu. That's not his real name, but everyone calls him that because he once mentioned he hated it. He's older than the rope, somehow still stronger than most, and has the emotional range of a shovel. Every day, he grumbles something about back in my day, and every day, nobody listens. Not out of disrespect, just because you've all heard the story, many times. Then there's the boy too young, too thin, and too optimistic. He still smiles sometimes. Not a lot. Just enough to make the rest of you nervous. Smiling attracts attention, and attention leads to more work or a lecture about posture from the overseer. You've tried to warn him. He thinks you're joking. You are not. Fights break out occasionally, usually about rope placement or who stole whose water jug, or whether a certain stone was already levered yesterday. No one ever wins these fights. They end in shrugs, silence, or a mutual agreement to just keep sweating in the same direction. There's no privacy. You relieve yourself next to the same trench as everyone else. You sleep on mats next to the same snoring, farting men who smell like fermented sorrow. You wake up to the sound of coughing and complaints. You go to bed to the same. But in between the blisters, bickering and biting flies, something odd happens. You start to know them, not like friends. Friends are for people with spare time and real choices. This is something else, a fellowship forged in shared discomfort and the knowledge that no one else understands what it's like to have their toenails filled with gravel, while simultaneously being judged by a goat. You trade bread crusts. You patch each other's tunics with twine and sarcasm. You invent new ways to insult the overseer under your breath, not because he'll hear, but because it keeps your brain from melting. When someone cuts their hand on a chisel, Hapu wraps it in linen without comment. When the boy gets heat dizzy, someone shares half a date with him. You joke about how generous that was. He doesn't get the joke. That's fine. You eat the other half. You think maybe, just maybe, this is the closest thing to community you'll get. Not celebration, not joy, but a shoulder beside yours pulling the same damn rope. And when someone falls, really falls, the rest of you stop. You lift them. You drag them to the side. You splash water on their face. Not because you're noble. Because it could have been you, and probably will be, tomorrow, or the day after. Then the whistle. Again, you groan, together, and pull. The sun finally begins to sink, but it doesn't leave quietly. It lingers. It glowers. It pours the last of its heat down your neck, like it's making a final argument for your misery. The shadows grow longer, but not cooler. You want to cheer, not out loud, of course, but just a small internal hooray that the day might be ending. Then the overseer calls for one more haul. Of course he does. You grip the rope again. The fibers are slick now, coated in sweat, dust, and a small quantity of despair. Your palms, already textured like dried figs, protesting crinkles and stings. You pull anyway, because arguing gets you nowhere, because your legs will keep moving whether you like it or not, because the sun has trained you to obey by now. The block scrapes forward. Someone behind you mutters something about curses. You can't tell if they mean ancient ones, or just the usual kind directed at stones and fate. You nod. Not in agreement. Just in rhythm. It feels like the only thing you can still control. By the time the final whistle blows, it's not a relief. It's just a sound. One more among the many that now populate your world. Creaking wood, shifting sand, the hiss of feet that no longer lift properly, and the strange, whispering rasp of fabric soaked through a second time. You let go of the rope. Your hands don't quite open. They stay curled for a moment, as if they've forgotten how to be anything else. When you finally straighten them, it feels like unfolding wet parchment. Every joint protests like you owe it an apology. The walk back to the workers' camp is not quiet, but it is slow. You don't talk. No one does. You just shuffle as a collective, a group of bent, sunburnt scarecrows trying not to trip on their own exhaustion. The path is the same every day, but somehow the rocks still surprise you. Your left foot finds one, sharp and smug, and you nearly pitch forward. The boy beside you giggles. You consider kicking him, but that would require energy. Instead, you mutter something about youth being a disease. Hapu snorts behind you. You count that as a victory. Back at the huts, the air smells like smoke, sweat, and bread that's trying its best. Someone's cooking something. Or maybe just burning something. You sit, not on a chair, you haven't seen one of those in weeks, but on a pile of worn-out rope, coils that feel almost soft, like a memory of comfort. You remove your sandals. They sigh with relief. Or maybe that's your feet. Either way, you inspect the damage. One toenail is a different color than it used to be. You decide not to worry about it. That's tomorrow's concern. Someone hands you a cup. It's beer again. Still warm. Still questionable. You sip. You don't enjoy it. You just participate. The sun is gone now. The sky is bruised. So are you. Somewhere nearby, someone snores before they've even fully sat down. Someone else farts with authority. You lean back. Not because you're comfortable, because you can't lean forward anymore. Night doesn't fall in the desert. It sinks. Slowly, steadily, like someone tipping a bowl of ink across the horizon. The heat doesn't leave, it just shifts. The ground, having stored the sun's anger all day, releases it in slow, sticky waves. It turns your sleep mat into something between a stove and a damp towel. You lie down. The mat is straw-filled, which sounds pleasant until you realize it's been refilled 3 times this season with whatever wasn't moldy. It pokes. It creaks. It smells faintly of sweat, dust, and that one time you spilled beer and never truly cleaned it up. There is no pillow. You fold a tunic under your head. It smells like you. This is not a compliment. The cloth is stiff from salt, the collar crusted from days of drying in the sun, while still damp with labor. Still, it's what you've got. You rest your cheek against it, and try not to think about how many times you've done this exact thing. In this exact spot, with this exact breath of air clinging to your throat. You would think you'd be too tired to notice discomfort. You would be wrong. Fatigue doesn't erase pain, it just turns it into background music. Your back throbs. Your thighs twitch. Your shoulders hum with the dull, familiar ache of stone hauling, as if they've begun composing their own sorrowful lullaby. Even your hands feel swollen, like they're still trying to hold the rope. Someone near you coughs. Someone else snores. You shift. A bug scuttles across your foot and disappears under the mat. You choose not to react. Reacting takes energy. Energy is expensive now. You stare at the reed roof. A few stars peek through the gaps. Somewhere far beyond them is the Pharaoh's afterlife, full of golden boats, perfect feasts and air that doesn't reek of other people's armpits. That's not where you're going. Probably. You were promised bread and honor. You received sand and repetitive strain injury. Still, you try to sleep. You close your eyes and count stones instead of sheep. You try to breathe deeply, but your nose is clogged with dust. You roll onto your side, but the straw jabs your ribs. You roll back, but your spine protests. You sigh. The sigh blends into the soft chorus of nocturnal discomfort, shared by everyone in the hut. Maybe you dream. Maybe you don't. But when the stick hits the wall in a few short hours, when the overseer's voice slices the quiet like an insult with legs, it won't matter. You'll stand. You'll eat. You'll pull. The rope will wait. The stone will still be there. And you, with your bruised feet, sunburned skin, and sand-lined teeth, will return to the ramp like you never left it. Because in some ways you never did. You are not a stone puller. Not exactly. Not anymore. You still smell like one beer sweat, sand and regret, but your hands are less blistered now, more clipboard than callous. That's because your father was the overseer, and now that he's old, half-blind, and suspiciously fond of yelling at walls, the title has been passed to you, not with ceremony. There was no scroll, no speech. Just one morning he shoved the whistle into your hand, muttered something about keeping the rope line straight, and sat down with a grunt that sounded final. You thought it would feel like promotion. It doesn't. It feels like inheriting someone else's hangover. You're young for this job. Everyone knows it. The workers know it. The scribes know it. Even the donkeys look at you like you've made a mistake. You still remember when you were on the other end of the rope, coughing dust and trying not to cry where people could see. Now, you're supposed to command, to shout, to supervise. Your voice doesn't carry like your father's. When he yelled, the air flinched. When you yell, it sounds like someone trying to scare off birds. You try anyway. You point at things. You adjust the rollers. You pace with authority, or at least you try to. Sand makes swagger difficult. They don't listen, not really. Hapu raises an eyebrow every time you speak, and the boy, the one who still smiles, sometimes openly laughs. You considered reporting them. But to whom? You are the authority now, which is unfortunate, because you're also the only one who still needs directions half the time. The foreman gives you scrolls, measurements, orders from above. They all seem to involve large numbers and in possible angles. You nod like you understand, then run to the scribe and whisper questions through clenched teeth. He helps, but not for free. Each answer costs you something: half a fig, a favour, a promise to let his cousin skip the mud-hauling rotation. You miss the rope, not the blisters, not the back pain, but the clarity. When you pulled, your task was simple: move stone. Now, your task is to make other people move stone, and they do it badly, slowly, with attitude. Some fake injuries. Some suddenly forget how levers work. One man spent an entire morning rearranging ropes that didn't need rearranging, just to avoid lifting anything. You try to be patient. You fail. You try yelling. That fails too. Eventually you adopt your father's expression: part scowl, part exhaustion, part permanent squint and blow the whistle. Not because it works, but because silence feels worse. At night, you sleep where your father used to, on a better mat, under a better roof, next to the same buzzing flies. You stare at the ceiling and wonder when the respect kicks in, when people will stop testing you, when your voice will harden into something that makes people jump. But mostly you wonder if your father ever liked this job, and whether the pyramid, for all its grandeur, is just a large excuse for men to yell at each other. You have a ledger now. It's not yours, but you write in it anyway. Your father used to carry it tucked under his arm like a third elbow, muttering about grain deliveries, limestone shipments, and how nothing ever arrived on time, unless it was a mistake. Now it's yours, worn, brittle at the corners, ink stained by at least 3 generations of handwriting that all seem to believe the previous entries were lies. You try to keep it neat. You fail. The sand gets in everything. It coats the pages, blunts the reed pen, and transforms every careful stroke into a smear that looks like hieroglyphics having a nervous breakdown. You press harder. The ink bleeds. You press lighter. The numbers disappear. You wonder if the scribes go mad, or if madness is a prerequisite for being assigned to manage this much mud, because the real problem isn't the stone. It's the mud. The bricks need it. The ramps need it. The workers demand it. And every morning you receive reports that there's either too much or too little. Never just enough. One team claims they had to dig with their bare hands. Another says their site flooded overnight, and now the ramp is a river. You check. It is, in fact, a river. A thick, brown, slowly oozing one that smells like wet leather and yesterday's failures. You're told to fix it. The scribe suggests redirecting a channel. The labourers suggest prayer. You try both. The channel collapses. The prayers are ignored. You are left staring at a puddle that reflects your increasingly unimpressed expression. The carts arrive late. Again. The oxen look ashamed. Again. The driver shrugs. He says something about a wheel, a storm, and possibly divine intervention. You nod slowly, and he mistakes that for understanding. What you're actually thinking about is whether the cart would float if pushed hard enough. You write it all down anyway. Page after page of what went wrong, who's to blame, and what might happen tomorrow if someone remembers to tether the donkeys. You sign each entry with a name that doesn't quite feel like yours, yet your father's name, now followed by the younger, as if you're just a less confident footnote. Once, you dreamed of building temples. Beautiful things. Symmetrical, serene. Places where people whispered instead of shouted. But this is different. This is stone blocks delivered to the wrong ramp. mud bricks melting in the sun, workers arguing about which direction uphill is. You try to believe it's still noble work. The pyramid rises, after all, one stubborn day at a time. But the cracks, literal and metaphorical, are hard to ignore. At night, you run your finger down the day's notes. You read the same sentence 3 times and still don't remember writing it. Your eyes burn. Your back aches not from lifting, but from carrying the constant weight of decisions no one prepared you for. You close the ledger. Dust puffs out like it's sighing too. Tomorrow, you'll try again, because the pyramid isn't going to supervise itself. You arrive at the site earlier than usual, not because you're enthusiastic, but because you couldn't sleep. The dreams were filled with sliding stones, collapsing ramps, and your father shaking his head from a throne made entirely of misfiled ledgers. So you get up before the sun has finished stretching, and for once, the sand hasn't turned to fire yet. It merely clings to your ankles like a particularly needy cat. You walk the perimeter like you've seen your father do 1,000 times. You nod at the guards. They nod back, politely confused. You pretend you're inspecting something: the slope of the ramp, the angle of the sun, the attitude of the limestone. You squint thoughtfully. It helps. You tap your chin. That helps less. Today, you've decided, will be different. Today you will lead. Not just because someone has to, but because you're tired of being looked at like a fig that rolled into the wrong basket. So when the crew arrives, rubbing sleep from their eyes and muttering curses into the backs of their own hands, you don't hesitate. You point. You speak. You assign. It works. Briefly. Hapu frowns but doesn't argue. The younger boy nods too quickly and trips over a chisel. Someone else grunts what might be agreement. You feel something tighten in your chest, not panic, but something suspiciously similar to hope. You allow it. Then the stone gets stuck. Of course it does. Halfway up the ramp it leans left. The rollers creak. The rope sags. One man yelps. Another begins to pray loudly and unconvincingly. You approach head high, hoping your tunic doesn't show the sweat now blooming across your back like a storm cloud. You circle the stone. You assess. You remember your father's advice. When something won't move, you don't move either. You stare at it until it feels bad. You try it. The stone does not feel bad. It stays exactly where it is. You call for more levers. One of them breaks. You call for water to cool the ramp. Someone spills it on your sandals. You call for silence. That works. Everyone stops to watch you flounder in quiet. So you kneel. You press your hand against the edge of the block. It's hot, coarse, ancient. It smells like dust and permanence. You whisper something. Not a prayer, just a promise. That you'll move it. That you have to. And then someone speaks behind you. Not a worker. The old scribe. He tells you to stop, to breathe, to look at the wedge under the base. It's misaligned, off by inches. You nod slowly, adjust it, and then the stone rolls forward. No cheers, no celebration, just motion. But that's enough. You stand up. Your knees crack. Your pride strangely does not. Someone pats your shoulder. Briefly, roughly. You don't turn around. You walk back down the ramp like you meant to all along. You didn't ask for a scribe, but one was assigned anyway. He showed up 2 weeks into your new role with a reed pen in one hand, a clay tablet in the other, and a smile that looked like it had been dropped several times. He's older than your father, thinner than most goats, and missing one front tooth which whistles slightly when he says anything with an S. His name is Penmanek. You think that might be a joke. He claims it isn't. Penmanek doesn't just record. He comments. Constantly. On everything. On your handwriting. On the labourer's posture. On the weather, the quality of mud bricks, the spiritual alignment of today's ramp. He narrates his own observations aloud, sometimes to you, sometimes to the gods, sometimes to the wall. At first you tried to ignore him. But he's loud. Not in volume, but in presence like a pot with a crack that won't stop whistling just because you're not looking at it. He wears a tunic stained with ink and wisdom, walks with a limp he refuses to explain, and smells vaguely of old scrolls and pickled onions. You suspect he eats while writing. He writes everything down, everything. Not just shipments and labor tallies, but your mistakes. The time you forgot to check the wedge under the roller. The moment you tripped over your own shadow during a site inspection. The time you tried to motivate the workers with a speech and accidentally insulted their mothers in 3 different dialects. It's all there, etched in clay, permanent. You asked him once why he bothers writing at all. He blinked slowly, like you'd asked why bricks exist. Because someone will want to know, he said. Someday. Probably not soon, but maybe later, or never. Doesn't matter. We record. You didn't find that comforting. Now, you've started glancing at his tablet when he's not looking, just to see what he's capturing. One day, under a smudge of dried ink, you see the line, "The boy tries." It shows. You don't ask what he meant. You don't want to ruin it by hearing the tone he said it in. Penamenek likes to sit in the shade of the supply tent and chew on reeds while squinting at the laborers like he's solving a puzzle made of sand and stubbornness. Sometimes he offers suggestions, unasked for. Usually useless, but once, just once, he told you to place the water jugs closer to the base of the ramp to reduce fatigue. It worked. No one thanked him, including you. He didn't seem to care. You're not friends. Not exactly. But he's the only one on site who doesn't flinch when you give an order, who doesn't judge your young face or soft calluses, who treats your mistakes like footnotes and your successes like they were inevitable. He still writes everything down. But now, you mind a little less. It starts with whispers, not the good kind no one whispers joyfully on a worksite. These are the sharp-edged kind, passed from mouth to mouth with just enough urgency to ruin everyone's morning. Someone important is coming. Someone very high up. No one says the name. They just widen their eyes and gesture vaguely toward the horizon, as if doom now travels by chariot. By mid-morning, it's confirmed, a royal inspection. Possibly a prince, possibly the Pharaoh himself, possibly someone who eats off gold plates and doesn't know what a blister looks like. You panic, quietly. Publicly, you keep your chin high and bark orders like you know how to use them. Internally, you are planning your own funeral. You order the ramp swept. You order the stone blocks to be cleaner somehow. You tell the water boys to wipe the jugs. You don't know why. It seems like something your father would have done. Penamenek doesn't help. He announces, with far too much amusement, that a royal boot has never stepped on sand without someone nearby being blamed for it. Then he writes that down. You can't tell if he means it as prophecy or punchline. The crew, predictably, begins pretending. Pretending they always work this fast. Pretending their tunics are clean. Pretending they remember which ramp they were assigned to. Hupu grunts louder than usual, hauling stone like he's trying to impress a god. The boy combs his hair with a chisel. Someone even starts singing. You want to scream. Instead, you nod. You say things like excellent pace and let's keep this rhythm, knowing full well the rhythm is entirely fake and will collapse the second the royal entourage disappears into the distance. Then, the dust cloud. It comes before the chariot. A fine, powdery announcement of privilege and polished sandals. The overseer before you, your father, used to say that royalty always arrived 5 minutes late and left 5 minutes too soon. He was wrong. They arrive 15 minutes late, leave when they're bored, and ask questions no one can answer. The chariot pulls up. It's gold-painted and full of expectations. A thin man with too many necklaces steps down and immediately wrinkles his nose. You bow. You introduce yourself. He doesn't care. He asks how many stones were moved this week. You tell him. He asks how many workers fainted. You hesitate. He nods thoughtfully, as if considering whether to report you or forget you. Then he walks up the ramp. Slowly. Painfully. Like someone who has never used their legs except to pose for statues. You follow, heart pounding, praying no one drops anything, breaks anything, or says anything with garlic on their breath. He inspects a block. He taps it with a finger. He hums. You think you might pass out. Then, abruptly, he declares the project sufficient, climbs back into the chariot, and disappears in a blur of horse and dust. Everyone exhales. Someone curses. Someone else sits down mid-task. The illusion crumbles, but the pyramid remains. And your name, apparently, survives the visit. You count that as a win. Your father doesn't leave the work site. Not really. He stopped overseeing months ago, but his mat is still near the edge of the shade canopy, the one made from fraying palm leaves and wishful thinking. He lies there, back against the earth, legs stretched out in that precise angle that suggests control over exactly nothing. But his ears, though, still work. You pass him every morning. He says nothing. Sometimes he grunts. Once in a while he spits in the direction of the sun, which seems to amuse him. You think it might be a joke or a challenge. Either way, the sun never answers. You used to ask him for advice. Now you don't. Not because you know more, but because his advice never changes. Keep them moving, he always said. And don't let the scribes talk too much. You're following the first part. The second, well, Pennamek narrates your life like it's his full-time job. Today, the mud shipment is late again. Someone tied the oxen incorrectly, and the cart tipped, spilling half the bricks into a ditch that smells like regret and onion water. You yell. The workers pretend they didn't hear. You yell again. One of them throws up their hands and walks off to fix it, probably planning your eventual downfall as they go. Your father watches this, eyes barely open. His lips curl in what might be judgment, or sleep, or indigestion. Hard to say these days. You sit beside him at midday, in the shade that's too thin to matter. You offer him a piece of bread. He takes it without thanks and chews with the slow determination of someone who's tasted every version of this meal for 3 decades and still isn't impressed. After a while, he speaks. The pyramid doesn't care about your feelings. You nod. It's true. The stones don't soften because you're having a bad week. The ramps don't even try to hold together when your ankle's bruised. You tried yelling at a block once. All it did was sit there, unimpressed and immune to guilt. Stop trying to be liked, he says next. It won't last. You don't respond. You don't need to. That part you've already learned. No one remembers the friendly overseer. They remember who kept the stones moving. He coughs a sound like gravel meeting age. Then he closes his eyes again. Conversation over. Later that afternoon, when one of the teams jams a cart between 2 ramps, you yell with more confidence. You hear your voice echo. It surprises even you. Hapu doesn't raise an eyebrow. The boy runs faster than usual. Even Pennamek looks up from his tablet, half interested. You check the old mat. Your father hasn't moved, but somehow you feel like he saw it. Or maybe you just want him to have seen it. Either way, you blow the whistle and get back to work. You didn't ask for recognition. You assumed it would never come. That's how the job works. You keep the stones moving, the workers breathing, and the scribes relatively dry. If nothing collapses and no one dies in an extremely embarrassing way, you count it as a good month. But now there's a ceremony, or something shaped like one. There's talk of a progress review by temple officials. You try not to grimace when you hear it. The preparations are absurd. Someone insists on sweeping the ramp with a palm fan. Someone else sprinkles crushed lotus petals near the inspection tent, as if that will distract from the smell of wet limestone and overworked armpits. Even Penmanek has been assigned a cleaner tunic, which he wears like a punishment. You are given a sash. It is red. It does not match anything else you own. It itches. You wear it anyway, because someone said it shows duty. You think it mostly shows sweat. You try to stand tall, but your left shoulder still aches from yesterday's rope incident, and your right foot has formed a blister the size of a date pit. Still, you look proud. Or at least upright. The officials arrive with the gentle chaos of important men who have never lifted a stone in their lives. They walk slowly, ask rhetorical questions, and sniff the air as though disappointment might be floating in it. You bow. You say all the right things. You present the ledgers. Pennanek, for once, says nothing. You think he might actually be holding his breath. They nod. They nod again. They frown thoughtfully, which you have learned is their version of approval. One of them gestures to the slope of the western ramp and says, "Promising angle." Another studies the alignment of the southern block row and mumbles, "Acceptable." A third wipes sweat from his brow with a golden cloth and mutters, brighter than expected. Then they leave. That's it. No speech, no scroll, no carved stone declaring your name for future generations. Just 3 words of praise so mild they could be mistaken for sarcasm, and the lingering smell of expensive oil. Someone pats you on the back. It's the boy. He looks genuinely thrilled. You almost smile. Then Hapu walks by, snorts and mutters, "Don't let it go to your head." The angle was always promising. You just didn't get in the way of it. That, you admit, might be the truest compliment you've received. Later, as the sun begins to yawn and stretch across the sand, you take off the sash and toss it onto a stool. The red fabric flops over like it's exhausted too. You sit beside it, watching the pyramid cast its shadow all the way down to the worker huts. It's still rising, slowly, stone by stone, and somehow that's enough. Not glory, not legacy, but progress witnessed by no one, recorded by one toothless man, and carried out by tired hands under your direction. Mild applause. But it counts. You begin keeping your own notes, not the ones for the foreman or the temple, not for Penmanek, who already has enough clay tablets to rebuild a medium-sized village if he ever gets bored. These are private, scratched lightly onto discarded sherds of pottery, tucked behind the corner of your sleeping mat, or hidden beneath the loose reed that no one bothers to sweep anymore. They're not about supply counts or ramp angles. They're not even practical, if you're honest. They're thoughts, observations, questions that don't fit into ledgers, like why do some stones sing when struck? Or how much does a pyramid weigh in sorrow? You don't show them to anyone. Not because they're embarrassing, but because they belong to the part of the mind that still thinks beyond the next whistle. Every evening, after the last stone is pulled and the shouting fades into the usual background noise of grumbling and digestive complaints, you sit in the same spot with a broken reed and a bit of leftover pigment. You don't write much. Just a few lines. A sentence, sometimes. Enough to make the silence feel like it noticed you. One night you write, "If the pyramid is a stairway to heaven, who climbs it when we're done?" You stare at the words until they blur into abstraction, then hide them under the edge of your mat, where they join the others in their quiet little archive. You never thought of yourself as a writer. Your father certainly wasn't one. He preferred action to reflection, movement to murmurs. He said people who write too much are just afraid of forgetting things that don't matter. Maybe he was right. Still, you keep writing. Penmanek finds one once. A fragment that slipped free from its hiding place. He picks it up, squints at it with that one cloudy eye of his, and reads aloud, "The workers do not sing anymore." He doesn't ask who wrote it. He just nods and returns it without a word. You begin noticing other things, too. The way one worker always rubs his shoulder before pulling. The slight limp in the water carrier's gait that he hides until dusk. The fact that the youngest boy stopped humming after the last visit from the royals. You write it all down, gently, as if recording it might protect it. You think maybe, if you ever leave this place a fantasy, but not an impossible one, you'll take these fragments with you. Bind them, perhaps. Not as a legacy, but as proof that you were paying attention. That someone did. Not the temple kind of attention. Not the grand, chiseled in granite declarations. Just quiet noticing, like picking up the corners of a life and folding them neatly so they don't blow away in the next hot wind. And maybe, long after the pyramid is finished and the last rope frays into dust, someone will find one of your sherds, read it, pause, and realize the stones weren't the only things being built. It starts as a whisper, as these things always do. Someone swears they smelled moisture in the wind. Someone else claims their joints ached in a new way, which clearly means something atmospheric. And then, before you can blink the sweat from your eyes, the camp is buzzing with it. Rain is coming. You try not to laugh. It hasn't rained here in 3 years. The sky above you is an uninterrupted canvas of cruel brightness, and the last time it darkened, it was because someone set the linen tent on fire during an argument about date rations. Still, the rumour grows legs, and then sandals, and then a voice that keeps finding you. The younger boy is especially hopeful. He tells you that his grandmother used to say the earth hums before it drinks. You want to tell him that what he's hearing is probably just Penmenek's knees, but you don't. You just nod and let him enjoy the dream of cool drops on his skin. Hapu, predictably, dismisses it with a grunt. He says if rain does come, it'll only make the ramp collapse and the stones slide, and then everyone will blame whoever was standing nearest the ledger. You look down. You're holding the ledger. Of course you are. Still, there's something in the air. Not wetness, not yet, but a stillness. The kind that makes donkeys shuffle awkwardly and old men glance toward the horizon as if remembering something they'd sworn to forget. The wind shifts, just a little. Enough to kick dust into your eyes with slightly less malice. You decide to prepare, just in case. You have the tarps unrolled. You assign a few men to re-dig the drainage trenches, the same ones no one has touched since last flood season, which you're fairly certain happened before the boy was born. Penmenek raises one eyebrow at you, impressed, or annoyed, or constipated. His expressions are extremely similar. The workers murmur about miracles. You hear someone say the gods are watching. Another insists they saw a bird fly east, which apparently means water, or warning, or possibly both, depending on the bird's wing angle. You look up. The sky remains blank, expressionless, like it's waiting for you to say something worth responding to. You don't. By evening, there's still no sign of rain. Just talk, just hope, just a quiet, communal ache of people who have been too dry for too long, imagining that the sky might finally remember them. That night, you sit outside your tent and listen. Not for thunder, not for wind, but for silence that feels thicker than usual. You place your hand on the ground. It's still warm. Still dry. Still the same. But for a moment, just a moment, you think you hear something. Not rain. Not yet. Just the pause before something breaks. Or begins. You were never planning to stay forever. Not really. At first, it felt like duty. Then it became routine. Then inertia. But somewhere along the line, the worksite became less a place and more a weight not crushing. Just steady, like a stone pressed gently against your chest, reminding you every time you breathe that you were not entirely your own. It starts small. You stop correcting the scribes when they spell your name wrong on the tablet. Just once. Then again. Eventually one of them writes Overseer Junior. You say nothing. You look at the mark. You nod. It's simpler that way. You stop wearing the sash. No one notices. Or if they do, they say nothing. You hand off more of the daily tasks, ramp checking, worker rotations, grain inventory to the boy, who is not a boy anymore. His shoulders have filled out. His voice carries. His questions are more thoughtful now, and his complaints more precise. You see your old habits in him, and your newer silences. You still walk the site, but you linger less. You visit the southern ramp, the one that always buckled in spring. It's smooth now, stable. You remember the year it gave out under a load of half-finished blocks and nearly buried 2 men. They lived, but neither returned. One became a potter. The other vanished into the river trade. You remember thinking that sounded like failure. Now, you wonder if it wasn't escape. Penmenek doesn't ask what you're doing, but he watches. He still writes. You think he's added more pages about you lately, quiet ones, lined with questions he'll never ask aloud. You suspect he knows. He always knows. At night, you sit farther from the others, not in anger, just apart. You listen to the way the workers laugh, not with ease exactly, but with less caution. You used to worry that meant they weren't working hard enough. Now you're glad someone's found enough breath to waste. You leave your notes behind. Not all of them, just the ones that don't need you anymore. Thoughts you can no longer carry. Observations that belong to the dust now. The small truths about men and stones and voices that rise together until one outlasts the other. One morning, before the first whistle, you walk past the ledger. You don't pick it up. You nod to the boy. He doesn't stop you. He just watches. His hand rests on the ledger like it was always meant to be there. You take the path that curves away from the camp, not the road to the capital, just a smaller trail, worn by donkeys and uncertain feet. You walk until the ramp is out of sight, until the pyramid no longer casts its shadow across your back. No one chases you. By midday, you're just another traveller. A man with sand in his shoes, silence in his hands, and the taste of stone still caught in his breath. The pyramid continues. Of course it does. But this time it will not need your name to do so. You don't live beside the pyramid. You live behind it, tucked into the rise just beyond the dust-swallowed ramps and the blocks too cracked for royal burial. That's where the workers' village sits, as if someone dropped a handful of mud brick cubes and said, close enough to be useful, far enough to be ignored. It's not large, but it's dense. The kind of place where no one owns silence, and privacy is a myth best left to scribes and the dead. The air always smells of something warm and vaguely regrettable, a mix of beer mash, damp straw, half-dried fish, and the kind of sweat that seems to have opinions. You tell yourself you'll get used to it. You don't. But your nose stops filing complaints eventually. The alleys between houses are narrow enough to make donkeys reconsider their life choices. Children dart through them barefoot, sticky with syrup and curiosity. They carry pebbles, old sandals, bits of string, and sometimes questions you wish you could answer, like, will the Pharaoh come live in our house when he dies? You laugh. They don't. They're serious. You change the subject. Your own hut is slightly slanted. Not by design. The foundation settled years ago during a particularly enthusiastic rainfall, and no one has bothered to re-level it. The roof leaks in exactly one spot right above, where your toes rest when you sleep. You've rearranged the mat a dozen times. The leak moves with you. You've started taking it personally. Inside, there's a low shelf with your cup, your reed brush, your not-so-sacred amulets, and a half-eaten date from a week ago that you keep forgetting to throw away. The walls are decorated with streaks of soot and handprints, not artistic ones. Just the daily evidence that everything here is touched too often, too roughly, and with fingers that never seem clean. Meals are communal when possible, awkward when not. There's a central oven blackened and temperamental where bread is burned with great regularity. The trick isn't not burning it. It's knowing how burnt is still edible. That line is thin. The bread, even thinner. Beer is the real currency. Thick, warm, and often chewed rather than sipped. It numbs more than it nourishes, but no one complains. Except that one man who insists he remembers when the brew had flavour. He says it every day. No one believes him. You think he likes the sound of his own disappointment. Nightfall doesn't bring quiet. It brings stories. Shouted from doorway to doorway, mixed with laughter, the occasional slap, and the sound of someone vomiting too close to someone else's sandals. You tell yourself this is community. A loud, sticky, inconsistent community that might try to borrow your last onion, but will also hold your head if you faint near the latrine trench. And yet it holds. The walls crack, the roofs sag, the firewood runs out, but the village persists. Because even if the Pharaoh gets the stars, you still need somewhere to sleep with your feet dry. Sort of. You begin each morning by hoping there's bread. You know there will be technically. The ovens always smoke, the baskets always fill, but you're hoping for bread, not just a scorched suggestion of it. You want something with weight. Something that doesn't crumble when you look at it too hard. Instead, you get what everyone else gets, a loaf that seems offended by the idea of softness. You tear it apart, bite into it with more caution than hunger, and chew as if your jaw has committed to early retirement. The crust scrapes the roof of your mouth. The centre tastes like flour's third cousin, mixed with yesterday's smoke and a few grains of courage. It is food. It is not satisfying. The ovens themselves are massive dome things built from cracked clay, always warm and always surrounded by yelling. Every bread queue involves someone claiming they were here first, someone else insisting they saw a mouse in the dough, and someone in the back quietly stealing a half-baked lump when no one's watching. You tried to speak up about it once. Now you don't. Beer is more reliable, not better, but consistent. Each worker is owed a daily ration thick, sludgy, poured from a jar that smells like soggy sandals left too close to a dying fire. It's warm, naturally. Cooling beer is a fantasy reserved for temple festivals and dreams involving palm trees. You drink it anyway. You have to. There's protein in it, they say, and strength, and a suspiciously bitter aftertaste that feels like it's judging your life choices. You remind yourself this is what builds pyramids: barley, sweat, and the knowledge that complaining changes nothing. Someone once said the pyramid drinks as much as the people do. Not literally, but you get the metaphor. Every stone lifted costs at least a cup of beer, a mouthful of bread, and a memory of something better. You don't remember what that something is anymore. Probably figs. Or clean silence. Midday is when the hunger lies to you. You feel full enough not to collapse, but still light enough to imagine chasing a goat and trying to eat it raw. The bread you brought from morning is now harder. The beer is warmer. The craving becomes specific: a honey cake, a dried fig, even a bite of something pickled. You chew another lump of bread instead. It does not answer your craving. It doesn't answer anything. In the evenings, if you're lucky, someone shares. A few olives, a turnip, something fried in yesterday's oil and offered without a name. The generosity is rare but real. Not out of abundance, no one here has abundance, but out of the strange solidarity that comes from surviving side by side with strangers who now smell like your furniture. You lie down at night with a belly neither full nor empty. It's just waiting. And in the dark, as the fire dies and the air thickens with snores, you realize you're still chewing. Always chewing. The walls in the village talk. Not with sound that would be alarming, but with scratches, symbols, and the unfiltered confessions of people who never learned the luxury of silence. Every surface is fair game. Clay walls, oven sides, the back of your neighbor's house. If it can be marked, it's been marked. You don't know when it started. Probably long before you arrived. Maybe before the pyramid was even a sketch in a royal dream. Some drawings are crude. A man with a donkey's head. A woman with 3 hands and 1 sandal. A cart with a suspiciously phallic wheel. Some are stranger, just spirals and eyes. And that one figure no one claims, crouching behind a half-drawn ramp, watching. Always watching. Then there's the writing. Names scratched in with sticks. Complaints. Boasts. Things like Hapu carried 3 stones without stopping, or Nefer hit her husband with a ladle again. There are prayers too, if you look carefully. Tiny, desperate lines. Let me live through summer. May the rope not snap. No scorpions today, please. You've never written anything yourself. Not here. Not on these walls. It feels too public, too exposed. You prefer your secrets on pottery shards under your mat. But you read what others leave, pretending it's just idle glancing. It's not. You're looking for something. Maybe just proof that everyone else is confused too. One corner of the village has become a favourite. The southern wall, near the broken cart axle someone turned into a bench. That patch is layered in years of messages overlapping, faded, sometimes deliberately scratched out and replaced. It's a palimpsest of frustration and humour, a community diary without a lock. Today someone's added a camel with wings and the phrase "one will fly far away." You wonder who drew it. You wonder if they ever did. Probably not. Most of the people who joke about leaving never get farther than the fishing village by the river. Still, you admire the effort. The camel has unusually elegant knees. There's also a gossip face-off happening. One side of the wall now reads, "Seta steals bread from the ovens." The next line, possibly by Seta, "Seta also has better hair than you." Then someone added, "Seta is probably a goddess and you're just mad." It's unclear where the truth ends and performance begins, but the wall remembers all of it. Penamenek once called graffiti the people's archive. You think he meant it as praise, or sarcasm, possibly both. He keeps a sketch of one particularly absurd mural, 2 men trying to carry a pharaoh on their backs, while the pharaoh reads a scroll upside down. He calls it realistic. Sometimes you sit by the wall and read for a while. It's better than beer, cheaper than figs, occasionally funnier than either, and every now and then you see a message that feels like it's talking just to you. You never answer. But you do come back the next day, just in case it says something new. There are many things you learn to live with in the village: heat, dust, disappointing bread, neighbours who pause and snore like dying bulls, but the latrine trench is not one of them. You survive it, yes, but you do not adjust to it. No one does. It is not a place. It is an experience, one that lurks behind every meal, every cup of lukewarm beer, and every unfortunate pear-shaped fig. It sits at the far edge of the village, dug into the dry soil with the carelessness of people who know they'll be digging another one next month. There's a thin fence around it, not for modesty, just to prevent goats from wandering in and making unfortunate decisions. The smell arrives before the view. Sharp, swampy, and unreasonably aggressive, like it's trying to claim territory inside your lungs. You hold your breath. It does help. The air leans in. The process is simple, in theory. You wait your turn. You try not to look at anyone. You do what must be done. You exit quickly and pretend the last 2 minutes didn't happen. But the reality is more complicated. The waiting line is long. The flies are militant. And the conversation is awkward at best, existential at worst. One man insists on humming loudly. Another stares into the middle distance, as though trying to disassociate from his own digestive system. The woman in front of you today is explaining, in vivid detail, the texture of yesterday's barley stew and how it betrayed her. You do not need this information, you get it anyway. You finally step in. The trench is wide, dark, and far too informative. Someone tried to add reeds along the edges once, as a privacy screen. The reeds died, possibly on purpose. The wood planks for squatting are cracked in ways that suggest they've been through things unspeakable, repeatable things. You try to finish quickly, but the body moves at its own pace when terror is involved. A goat bleats nearby. A child laughs. You feel judged by both. There is no toilet paper, of course. There are leaves if you're brave. Sand if you're desperate. A broken shard of pottery if you're truly out of options and looking to test fate. You leave without looking back. You don't talk about it with anyone, but later in the village, when you see someone walking just a bit too slowly or wincing as they sit down, you both know. You nod. They nod. No words are exchanged. That's the trench bond. Stronger than friendship. Older than beer. And the worst part, you'll be back, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow morning, whenever the bread and barley do their inevitable, horrible work. You once heard someone say that great civilizations are built on humble foundations. They didn't mean this. But here you are anyway, surviving, squatting, and quietly praying for better aim. When the sun finally slinks down behind the quarry ridge, and the last stone has been wrestled into place with more swearing than science, you shuffle back to the village like a half-dried fish left too long in the market. Sleep becomes the goal. Not deep, peaceful sleep. Just the kind that lets you disappear long enough for your back to forget it's angry. Your bed is not a bed. It is a mat. If you're lucky, it's only mildly damp. If you're very lucky, the rats are elsewhere tonight. Most evenings, it's just you, the mat, and the sound of other people sleeping in ways that suggest personal vendettas against harmony. The man to your right grinds his teeth like he's trying to chew through time. The woman 3 huts down snores with the conviction of a temple gong. Someone coughs. Someone always coughs. It becomes the village lullaby. You try not to toss too much. The floor is unforgiving, and your mat makes a sound like a goose being stepped on every time you shift. You've attempted every possible configuration of limbs and angles, including one where your feet are on the wall and your head is nestled between 2 clay pots. That one actually helped. Until the pots shifted, you still have the mark. The heat doesn't help. The hut stores the day's warmth like a jealous clay oven, radiating it back through the night with the commitment of a bad memory. You sweat. You turn. You hope. A breeze enters. It smells like smoke and garlic and someone's leftover onions. You're grateful anyway. Some nights dreams visit. Not kind ones. You dream of stones that chase you, of ropes that wrap around your throat when you call for help. You dream of your own name being written wrong on a tablet, of your mother asking why your hands look so old now. You dream of the pyramid finishing without you, rising higher and higher while you search for your sandals in the dirt. Other nights, no dreams come, just blankness. A quiet, dusty pause between one day and the next. Those are the better ones. You wake with your face in your arm and your hair full of straw and your joints politely muttering instead of screaming. There's no rooster, no bell, just the shift in air, the change in light, and the knowledge that someone, somewhere, is about to blow the whistle again. You lie still for a moment longer, pretending the morning hasn't noticed you yet. Then a cough, then a groan, then the unmistakable sound of someone stepping into their sandals and already regretting it. And once again you rise. Not because you're rested, but because the pyramid doesn't care. And sleep like bread, like beer, like everything else was never quite enough anyway. Once a week or whenever the traders remember you exist, there's a market day. Not a real market, like the ones in Memphis with proper stalls and people who bathe. This is more of an open patch near the edge of the workers' village, where someone lays out a basket, someone else squats behind it, and commerce begins in the form of suspicious haggling and mutual disappointment. You go because everyone goes, and because you might possibly find something edible that hasn't been buried under 3 days of regret and sun. You don't go for joy. No one here shops with joy. You go because your mat needs mending, your stomach wants something with flavour, and your left sandal is more gap than sole. The first thing that hits you is the smell, a rotating perfume of dried fish, tired goats, pickled onions, sweat, and something sweet that turns out to be fermented dates in denial. You sniff, you regret it, you proceed. Vendors yell their prices as if that makes them truer. 3 for 1, says a man selling turnips that appear to have lived difficult, emotional lives. Only slightly cracked, says another, holding up a clay jug that leaks from 3 places but has a nice decorative swirl near the base. A woman waves what looks like a meat pie but smells like salted clay. She smiles. You pretend not to see her. You bargain, of course. That's tradition. You offer 1 thing. They laugh. You offer 2. They frown. You offer 3 and walk away. They call you back. You pretend to hesitate, then nod, like you've just won a silent war of strategy and self-control. In truth, you've overpaid. But so has everyone. It's not really about the price. It's about being able to say later he wanted 4, I gave him 2. Even if you gave him 5. You find a small basket of dried figs. They're shriveled, suspicious, but oddly fragrant. You pick one up. A child watches you with the quiet intensity of someone who will absolutely steal it if you look away. You buy 2. You eat 1. You hide the other. This is how trust is built in bites and lies. Then there's the entertainment, if you can call it that. A man juggling rocks, badly. Another man with a flute and a snake that looks more bored than dangerous. Laughter that sounds too loud and too hollow. But it's laughter. You let it sit for a while in your ears before it disappears again. You leave the market with fewer coins, a slightly softer sandal, a fig pit in your teeth, and a vague feeling that something important just happened and you missed it while debating over goat cheese. But you'll come back next time. Because even if everything is overpriced, sun-baked, and vaguely edible, it's still the only place that makes the village feel like it's pretending to be something more than survival. Even if only for an hour. The village doesn't have a doctor. It has a man. His name is Merry, though most people just call him the Bone Man. No one knows if that's because he fixes them or collects them. Possibly both. He lives in a narrow hut near the west wall, the one with the cracked lintel, and a smell that suggests old onions and old ointments. There's a line outside most days, made up of people pretending not to be limping. You don't go unless you have to. No one does. Because visiting Merry means admitting something hurts badly enough that you're willing to be rubbed with ash, bark, or unidentifiable paste wrapped in linen that looks like it's already seen war. Still, when your shoulder gives a crunch every time you raise your arm, you find yourself in line, behind Happy, who claims he's just checking on a friend while clutching his knee like it's planning a rebellion. The inside of Merry's hut is darker than it needs to be. There are bundles of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling, a few bone splints stacked like unlucky scrolls, and a pot of something gently steaming in the corner. It smells like regret and overcooked garlic. Merry greets you without looking up. He's carving something. It may or may not be relevant to your health. You sit on a mat that squeaks under your weight. He prods your shoulder with a finger that feels sharper than it should. You flinch. He nods, as if this confirms a long-standing theory about the universe. Then he begins treatment. The treatment consists of 3 steps. 1. Apply something that burns. 2. Wrap it in cloth that smells faintly of goat. 3. Hit you lightly and say, "That'll settle by next flood." You want to ask for more clarification, but Mary doesn't do questions. He tells you your muscles are confused. You assume he means strained. He says you should sleep with your arm on a rock. You nod, wondering if this is medical advice or a threat. Either way, it feels vaguely traditional. On your way out, you pass a woman holding her ankle and a boy with what appears to be half an arrow stuck in his tunic. Mary says they'll be fine. You choose to believe him because the alternative is too depressing. That night, your shoulder does feel different. Not better, just more aware of itself, as if the paste has convinced it to start talking back. You shift, you groan, you whisper curses into your mat, but you fall asleep anyway, because the day was long and your pillow is a rolled-up tunic and your body knows it doesn't get to choose anymore. In the morning, you stretch. The shoulder protests, then relents. Slightly. You smile. Barely. Then you bump it on the doorframe and start the cycle over again. The bone man wins again. Somehow. You hear the singing before you see the fire. Not the melodic kind, no one here was born to be a bard, but the shout sung staccato that only erupts when someone's managed to barter for extra beer or found a reason, however flimsy, to declare a celebration. Today's reason? A man named Jehuti found a scarab in his bread and claimed it was a sign from the gods. Whether it was a blessing or a curse is unclear. Either way, a festival has been declared. The village doesn't have decorations. It has fabric scraps tied to posts and one broken drum that's more enthusiastic than musical. Someone lights a fire in the center of the square, and within moments, the perimeter fills with people clutching their evening beer ration as if it contains ancient wisdom, or at least enough froth to forget their knees. You join, not because you're festive, but because being alone in your hut while the entire village shouts about beetle omens feels like a path toward madness. The fire is warm. The music, if you can call it that, is provided by 3 men with pots and 1 woman who insists she can whistle in 3 tones. She cannot, but her confidence is deeply respected. Someone attempts a dance. It involves more stomping than style. Someone else joins in, then immediately regrets it but continues anyway out of pride and peer pressure. You clap, not because it's good, but because it's happening, and that seems worth honouring. A plate of food appears rare, spiced, and questionably shaped. You're told it came from a cousin's cousin who works near the temple kitchens and owes someone a favour. You do not ask what it is, you chew. It's greasy, hot, and vaguely celebratory. It burns the roof of your mouth. That seems appropriate. Children run in circles. A dog steals half a turnip. A woman throws a sandal at her husband and laughs when it hits him. Someone tells a story about a god who married a goat disguised as a priest. No one corrects them. The story ends with a waterfall of beer foam and the phrase, "And that's why we always count the onions twice." You nod solemnly. It makes no sense, but it feels like it does. You stay longer than you expected. The stars blink slowly above the smoke. The pyramid looms in the distance, lit faintly by moonlight and the memory of fire. For once, it doesn't feel like a task, just a shape on the horizon, a quiet witness. Someone pulls you up to dance. You decline. They insist. Your feet move. Badly. You participate in what can only be described as communal wobbling. You are not graceful. You are not alone. Later, you sit on the cool ground, beer cup empty, face warmed by fire and company. You think about tomorrow, about stones, about aches that haven't arrived yet, and you let them wait. For now, the Beetle Festival holds. And you almost forget how tired you are. She lives near the edge of the village, just past the row of empty clay jars and the leaning fig tree that stopped bearing fruit after someone used it as a clothesline. Her name is Mirette, though most people just call her the widow, as if her identity began only after someone else's ended. She doesn't argue. She doesn't say much at all. You see her most mornings, sweeping the dust in front of her door, which returns immediately as if the wind itself is testing her patience. Her hut is the smallest, the cleanest, the quietest. Children avoid it. Dogs walk faster near it. The men nod politely but don't linger. There's something in her stillness that unnerves people. It's not sadness. It's precision. Like she's measured the whole world and found it tolerable only in silence. Her husband, they say, was crushed by a block. One of the heavy ones not during lifting, but rolling. A mistake in angle. A slip in timing. One of those accidents that reminds everyone the pyramid doesn't forgive geometry. His name was etched briefly on a tablet near the workers' gate. The ink washed off in the first rain. She never asked for compensation, never cursed the site. Just gathered his tools, gave half to a cousin, kept the other half in a basket no one's allowed to touch. She burns incense once a week. Never the same day. You tried asking why once. She looked at you like you'd asked why the sky was uphill. She sells thread now. Thin, uneven, dyed with patience. You bought some once, even though you had nothing to mend, just to have a reason to speak. She handed it to you wrapped in papyrus, said nothing, and returned to her seat. You nodded like that meant something. People think she's bitter. They say it with the confidence of people who've never had to sleep in the middle of a sentence that never ends. But when the boy with the crooked leg tripped near the oven fires, it was her who reached him first, wrapped his burn in something cool and quiet. She left before his mother even realized help had come. Now and then you see her at the edge of the quarry, not working, just watching, as if she's listening for the stone that took her husband, as if it might confess. You watch her once, just once, until she turns and catches your gaze. You look away immediately. When you glance back, she's already gone. Later, back at your hut, you find one of her threads slipped into your doorframe, pale green, unknotted. Useless, unless you count quiet company as function. You don't ask what it means. You keep it anyway. There comes a day sooner than you think, later than you hope, when you realize the pyramid will finish without you. Not in your lifetime, maybe not in your child's, but the idea of it, the endless lifting, hauling, carving, shouting it doesn't need your hands forever. It never did. And so, one morning with sand in your sandals and a small ache in your heel that won't go away, you begin looking at the village with the eyes of someone preparing to forget it. You trace your steps without meaning to. You pass the oven where your bread burned every third morning, the one that smoked too much and housed at least 3 lizards. You pass the graffiti wall, where Setter's ongoing soap opera with the ladle and the bread thief is still unfolding in dusty chapters. You pass the bone man's hut, where someone is already limping inside, and you don't need to know why. You just know they'll come out bandaged and confused. There's a child building a tower with discarded bricks. It leans immediately, but he doesn't seem to mind. You remember doing the same, once not here, but somewhere that smelled of river reeds and fish stew. You pause. He looks up. You nod. He nods back. That's enough. You take the long way back, not because you're sentimental, but because you aren't in a hurry anymore. The wind is different today, a little cooler, a little kinder. It kicks up the dust just enough to remind you that nothing here stays clean, and nothing here stays still, not even the memories. Your hut looks smaller than you remember. Everything does. The mat, the shelf, the cup with the chipped rim, the sandals you meant to fix. You sit on the edge of your mat and look at the wall. There, faint but still visible, is the shape your shoulder carved into the plaster from all those nights of leaning. You touch it. You leave it. You pack little. A tunic. A few figs. The papyrus note you never showed anyone, the one with your real name spelled correctly for once. You look at the green thread from Murray, still tied around your cup's handle. You don't untie it. You carry the cup as it is. No one stops you. A few people wave. A few more don't look up. That feels right. As you pass the edge of the village, you glance back just once. The huts blur in the midday light. The graffiti wall flickers like a half-remembered joke. The ovens smoke, the goats argue, the dust swirls. And above it all, far beyond the village, the pyramid rises still unfinished, still waiting, still pretending it's the most important thing in the world. But you know better now. You know the real pyramid is here, built from laughter, curses, blisters and fig pits, from sandals too worn to fix and songs too loud to forget, from walls that remember you longer than your name ever will. You do not carry stone. You do not lift rope. You do not smell of barley, beer, or hear your joints whisper threats with every step. You are the Pharaoh. Or, at least, you are meant to be wrapped in linen, perfumed in oils, your feet untouched by sand unless it has been sifted and blessed by priests first. The pyramid rises in your name, but you will never touch it. That's what hands are for. Other people's hands. Your day begins not with a whistle, but with a song. Not a good song, but a practiced one, a hymn meant to remind you that you are divine, that your breath steadies the Nile, that your smile ensures the grain will grow, even though you haven't smiled sincerely since you were 6 and realized figs had wasps inside them. You are bathed by servants, oils rubbed in, not for cleanliness, you were clean yesterday, but to remind the body it belongs to something sacred. You smell of myrrh, cinnamon, and something floral whose name you can never remember, but everyone else insists is very expensive. The scent makes the air near you feel full, deliberate, and slightly smug. Your sandals are placed gently beside your feet, which never touch the floor until they're padded in woven palm and soft leather. They are spotless. Not because you walk carefully, but because someone cleans them between every chamber. You once dropped a grape, and before it landed, 3 men had leapt forward to ensure it hit linen, not stone. They apologized for letting it fall. Breakfast is bread without crust, honeyed dates, and something made of goat's milk that is always described as delicate and never finishes being swallowed. You eat slowly, not out of grace, but because all eyes are watching. The silence of the court is not peace, it's calculation. Everyone is listening for the sound of your displeasure. You make none. You give them nothing. They fill the gap with flattery and polite terror. When you speak, it is through layers. A priest echoes your words, a scribe records them, a steward interprets them. You once asked for cool water and received a fountain. You learn not to ask directly after that. You walk to the temple with a train of attendants that stretches longer than your shadow. The stone floors are cool. They do not creak. They were chosen for quiet. You see your own face carved into pillars. The same expression. The same chin. The same lie. You do not know what the workers eat. You've heard the word ration but have never used it in a sentence. You assume they are cared for. You ordered it, didn't you? The pyramid is visible from your chambers now, not just a plan on papyrus. It gleams in the sunlight like ambition wrapped in stone. You are told it rises well, that it is large, that it is perfect. You nod. You do not ask what it costs. That is someone else's duty. When you enter the temple, it does not feel like entering a place. It feels like being swallowed slowly by reverence. Columns rise like petrified forest trunks, thick with carvings and paint that no one is allowed to touch, except the man who touches them for you. Light slants through slits in the ceiling, not by accident, but by design, as if even the sun must kneel and approach carefully when you pass. The floor is polished. It reflects your feet, your sandals, your robes, but never your face. You once asked if that was symbolic. The priest said yes. You didn't ask for more. You've learned not to. Explanations rarely make things clearer. They only make them longer. They lead you to the sanctum, not the true inner chamber. Even you must wait for certain rituals, but close enough that the smell of incense feels like something trying to pry open your memory. It smells of burning cedar, damp stone, and the soft crackle of dried petals meant to disguise how long it's been since the gods last spoke. You speak your name aloud. Not loudly, just clearly. It is repeated by the priests, then by the echoes, then by the walls. The architecture ensures your identity bounces off every surface until the air itself seems to believe you're eternal. You are not, but no one here says that. There is chanting. You are not expected to join, just to stand, to be stood near, to allow your presence to do the work your hands never will. The gods are invoked. Promises are recited. A goat is somewhere nearby, very confused about its fate. You pretend not to notice. You look forward, at the statue of the god shaped like a falcon, or a sun, or something else depending on the festival calendar. This is what power looks like, you remind yourself. It smells of herbs. It speaks in riddles. It requires many witnesses and no questions. You keep your back straight and your jaw still. You have practiced this since childhood. Your mother used to remind you that blinking too often was a sign of weakness. After the ritual, you are offered fruit. Dates, pomegranates, a fig sliced open in a way that makes it seem slightly indecent. You pick the smallest one. You chew slowly. It tastes of sweetness and performance. You nod, and the entire room sighs with relief. On the walk back, no one speaks. The path has been cleared. Sand swept, pebbles brushed aside. The silence isn't calm. It's curated. It's the kind of silence that costs 10 people a morning's labor. Back in your chamber, you wash your hands. Not because they're dirty, but because the ritual demands it. You stare at your fingers. They've never bled from stone. They've never pulled a rope. But they've signed orders. They've raised scepters. They've pointed at maps and said there. You remind yourself that this is leadership. Even if sometimes it feels like imitation. The meal arrives in waves, not courses, not dishes. Waves like the Nile in festival season, too generous and too insistent, flooding your chamber with the scent of roasted fowl, crushed herbs, date syrup, and at least 6 things that look suspiciously like meat, but are introduced only as offerings. No one tells you what animal they came from. You assume it was expensive. You sit alone. There are no shared bowls, no jokes passed across the table. Just you, your gold-trimmed plate, and 32 hands that do not eat, but move constantly adjusting plates, refilling wine, removing crumbs before they consider settling. One servant brushes a fly away before it lands. You don't thank him. That's not the role you play here. The bread is soft. Your bread is always soft. You haven't cracked a tooth since childhood. You remember that one time the crust was overdone. There were apologies. There was a ritual. Someone was reassigned to linen folding for a year. You chew slowly now. Not from fear. From habit. A musician plays nearby, quietly. A stringed instrument that was probably tuned by someone who prays exclusively for harmony. The sound slips into the corners of the room and hides there. You barely hear it, but it's there. Like expectation. You reach for a dish, then pause. You don't actually want it, but reaching feels like the right move. You take a slice of melon, juicy and pale, cut into a perfect crescent. It tastes like cool water and careful gardening. You nod. A servant sees. The gardener will hear about it before sunset. The wine is from the Delta. Sweet, rich, expensive enough to bribe a priest. You sip. It numbs your tongue slightly. Not in a bad way. Just enough to remind you that indulgence is a dull edge, not a sharp one. Too much flavor is dangerous. It makes you aware of hunger. Hunger makes you aware of emptiness. And you by definition are not supposed to be empty. You are the full vessel, the overflowing jar, the living God. You finish your wine slowly, like swallowing that lie one warm drop at a time. The servants clear the table before you finish chewing. You've stopped noticing when they come and go. Sometimes you think they're trained to move between blinks. You once dropped your spoon. It never touched the floor. You rise, not because you are finished, but because that's the cue. 2 guards fall into step behind you. You don't know their names, you assume they know yours. You walk out of the chamber, past the pillars, past the flowers that bloom only near your window, past the fruit bowl no one touches unless you do first. You feel full, but not satisfied. You could have had anything. You did. And yet somehow it all still tasted like routine. There is a room made entirely of reflections. Not literal mirrors, those are rare, fragile, and terribly expensive, but polished copper sheets, burnished until they shimmer like shallow water just before it boils. They line the walls, the columns, even the ceiling. This is where you go to be seen. Not by others, by yourself. Or at least the version of yourself that has been constructed so carefully, so methodically, that even you have started to believe it. You step inside and the room greets you with 20 pharaohs. All you. all standing a little too straight. All wearing the same expression, neutral, serene, unreachable. You hate that word. Unreachable. It sounds divine until you realize it also means alone. The air is warm here, not stifling, just persistent, like it's waiting for you to say something sacred. You don't. You step closer to one of the panels. Your face stares back, familiar, controlled, slightly distorted by the curve in the metal, like your cheek has learned the art of diplomacy. You adjust your posture. The reflections do the same. You raise your chin. They agree. You lower your eyes. They lower theirs. Obedient, predictable, exhausting. A priest once told you that these sessions are important, that rulers must confront their image to understand their role. You asked what would happen if the image ever changed. He smiled that tight, temple smile and said, "Then the role must change too." You haven't asked again. You used to come here with your father. He never spoke inside the room. He would stand still for minutes, sometimes hours, as if trying to intimidate his own reflection into confessing something. You asked him once what he saw. He said, "Enough." You didn't understand it then. You do now. Today you notice something small. A line near your mouth. Not a deep one, but new. Something left behind by too many sunrises and too few true smiles. You want to touch it. You don't. The reflections would all move at once, and you're not ready to see yourself react. You step back instead. A servant enters behind you, silent as breath. She bows. Her eyes don't rise. You almost speak. Then you remember the room isn't meant for talking. It's meant for appearing. You nod. She vanishes like a punctuation mark no one needed. You glance around once more. 20 pharaohs. All correct. All clean. Not a smudge. Not a crack. Just you, multiplied and polished until reality starts to feel decorative. You leave without ceremony. Outside, the light hits your face differently. Brighter. Less filtered. There's a breeze. It smells of cooking lentils and horse sweat, things not usually permitted in divine spaces. You breathe it in anyway. And for a moment, a brief, dangerous moment, you wonder what would happen if you walked out the back gate, removed the jewelry, smeared a little dirt on your cheek, and let yourself vanish among the workers. Just to see what you look like when no one's watching. You receive news in scrolls, not letters, not messages. Scrolls long, winding, scented like cedar and ceremonial dread. They arrive in batches, carried by scribes who wear expressions like wet laundry and speak only when summoned. Most scrolls begin with praise. Not modest compliments, but towering stacks of reverence. Light of the sun, chosen of the falcon, he who orders the Nile. You scan past these now. They mean nothing. Like a curtain someone always insists on drawing before speaking plainly. The scrolls contain updates, grain tallies from the delta, stone movements at the pyramid, dreams that priests have interpreted on your behalf without asking if you slept well. They include suggestions, warnings disguised as blessings, and requests buried so deeply in courtesy that you need a second reader just to find them. That's Pen Khufu's job, the royal decipherer of subtext. You think he's part jackal. One scroll arrives with actual sand between the folds. You unfold it slowly. It's from the overseer at the workers' village. He's careful. He says everything is proceeding well, but the word well is used like a man saying fine while quietly bleeding from the ankles. He mentions heat fatigue, rope shortages, a few collapsed ramps. Nothing urgent, just details. You nod, as if this isn't your first time reading disaster wrapped in deference. You draft a reply. Not directly. You tell your steward what to write. Commend the efforts, you say. Provide new rope. Increase beer rations. Add incense to the temple on their behalf. You hesitate, then add, tell them the Pharaoh sees their strength. It sounds royal, but also human. You're proud of that. The steward writes it down. His ink smudges slightly. You pretend not to notice. One smudge in a sea of inked ceremony doesn't matter. Later, the priests arrive. They've brought another dream. This time, the god was seen riding a cow into a river made of gold, where he blessed a cat and declared the pyramid ahead of schedule. You nod solemnly. You ask what it means. They say progress is assured. You ask if the cow was yours. They say yes. You're not sure they understood the question. You approve the interpretation anyway. Then come the singers. Children mostly, brought in by temple tutors, trained to chant the names of your ancestors until those names begin to melt into each other like wax left in the sun. You listen. You do not interrupt. You recognize some names. You don't remember the stories. Your own name is sung last, drawn out into syllables that sound too wide for a single breath. You close your eyes. It doesn't echo. You're not in the mirror room now, just in your audience hall, surrounded by sandstone, sound-absorbing linens, and people waiting to see if you blink. You don't. You open your eyes. The scribes record your expression as neutral. You nod once. That's enough. Another scroll arrives. He arrives in the late afternoon, just as the shadows from the pillars stretch out like lazy cats across the floor. He is not announced with trumpets or dancers. Just a quiet cough, a low bow, and a scroll case under his arm that looks like it's been dropped more times than a forgotten promise. He's the royal architect, or at least the one brave enough to claim the title today. You allow him into the garden. Not the main one that's for guests who might matter later. This is the inner courtyard, shaded by a fig tree with ambitions and a fountain that murmurs more than it flows. He kneels without being asked. Then he begins unrolling diagrams, sketches and models, some painted, some scratched into bark, one drawn on the back of a temple festival invitation. You say nothing. He talks anyway. He speaks of angles and load-bearing arches. He talks about how the ramp curvature is smoother now, how the base of the pyramid has been reinforced with joyfully obedient granite, how the workers have learned to anticipate the stone's behavior. He says this last part with pride, like he's trained the limestone to sing. You nod. He does not ask if you understand. He assumes you do, or pretends not to care. One diagram catches your eye. It's an alternate plan, a second pyramid, slightly smaller, slightly closer to the river. You ask why it's there. He stutters, says it was an old idea, just an option. Something your father considered, briefly, when he thought one tomb might not be enough. You ask if it's still possible. He says, anything is possible, Great One, which means absolutely not, but I'd rather not die for saying so. You lean back against the pillar. The stone is cool. It never sweats. You ask him how much longer the work will take. He gives you the usual answer: a season, perhaps two. You both know that's a guess. You both accept it. Time is soft when wrapped in titles and sand. He asks if you'd like to visit the site. Not to work, of course, just to walk the perimeter. See how your name is being shaped into shadow. You consider it. You almost say yes. Then you remember the heat, the smell, the sound of stone dragging across wood. You say, another day. He bows again, starts collecting his scrolls carefully now, as if afraid they'll whisper your judgment to each other when he leaves. You stop him before he goes. Ask his name. He seems startled, but answers. You nod once. You do not repeat it, but you remember it. He leaves, walking backwards until the doorway swallows him. You stare at the scroll. He forgot a cross-section of the pyramid's heart, where the burial chamber waits. Empty. Waiting for you. You roll it up and set it aside, beside the fruit bowl. It can wait. So can you, but not forever. At night you do not sleep under stars. You sleep beneath the ceiling of your private chamber, a painted dome so meticulously speckled with gold and indigo that it's meant to resemble the night sky. A perfect illusion. The kind of sky that never clouds, never shifts, never forgets to be beautiful. The kind that cannot rain. You lie on a raised bed, its legs carved into lions that are meant to guard you in sleep. They do not move. They do not blink. But their mouths are slightly open, as if frozen mid-roar. You once asked if that was symbolic. A priest told you it meant protection through stillness. You asked if stillness had ever stopped a spear. He didn't answer. The room is quiet. Too quiet. Designed to absorb echoes. Even your breath feels flattened, like the walls are trying to hush your existence. There is incense, always incense burning in shallow bowls, faintly releasing the smell of crushed lotus and cedar, a scent so familiar that it no longer smells like anything at all. Above you, the painted stars gleam. You know their patterns. You've been taught their names. But you don't know what they mean. You know they mattered once, to someone who could walk outside and point to the real thing. Someone who didn't need to pretend the ceiling was enough. You are told that when you die, not if, never if, your soul will rise through these same constellations, guided by prayers and preserved organs, until you reach the field of reeds, a place where labor is light, food is endless, and nothing ever breaks or bruises. You nod when this is explained to you. You do not ask how one could possibly enjoy a paradise that never changes. Your tomb is already being carved, not just a resting place, an engineered promise. A structure built to last longer than your kingdom, maybe even longer than your name. Inside it, there will be food, games, spells, figurines shaped like servants who will work for you in the afterlife. You've seen them. They smile. All of them. Identical, obedient. You wonder if they can be told apart once the paint fades. You turn on your side. The linen sticks to your skin. Somewhere outside the window which does not open, you hear a single note of laughter. Probably a servant, or maybe someone from the kitchens. You almost call for someone, just to break the silence. Then you remember, no one comes unless you ask for something. And tonight, you are not sure what you would ask for. You stare at the ceiling. The stars do not move. They never have. And in their stillness, they seem to whisper that you will last just as long. Maybe longer, whether you want to or not. In the morning, when the advisors are still debating whether the fish should arrive steamed or smoked, you retreat to the garden. Not because you crave nature, at least, not the wild kind. This garden has been measured, every plant chosen, trimmed, relocated, and occasionally replaced when it failed to grow with enough decorum. It is not a place of wilderness. It is a place of curated greenery, maintained so precisely that even the bees seem to buzz on a schedule. The path winds in perfect geometry. Sandstone tiles laid with the kind of symmetry that suggests either brilliance or madness, possibly both. The grass, where there is any, grows in short, suspicious tufts, guarded by carefully spaced palms whose shadows never quite touch. You walk the path slowly, as expected, with attendants trailing at a distance like respectful ghosts. They make no sound, except the occasional foot brushing against a reed they forgot was there. You inhale. The air is not clean, but it's fragrant. It carries the scent of lotus, date blossoms, and the faint metallic hint of whatever the gardeners used to discourage ants. It smells like effort, not freedom. Still, it is better than incense and marble dust. You take another breath. It tastes like memory pretending to be air. A bird chirps overhead. You look up. It's a sparrow, ordinary, uninvited, possibly illegal. No one trained it. No one fed it. And yet here it is, sitting on the edge of a pergola carved to resemble something mythical. You wait to see if anyone shoos it away. No one does. For a moment you think perhaps it will sing something new. It does not. It flies away. The moment remains small and empty. There's a pond in the center of the garden, ringed with white stones that someone polishes every morning. The water reflects you, slightly distorted. You look taller in the ripples, which is not unpleasant. Goldfish drift beneath the surface, unaware they are part of an aesthetic. You crouch beside the pond and flick a finger toward the water. The fish scatter. You don't blame them. The fig tree in the corner is the oldest thing here. Older than the walkway, older than the pergola, maybe older than you. It leans slightly to the left, not because anyone asked it to, but because the wind once told it a story, and it's still listening. You find yourself drawn to it more than the statues. You stand beneath it, and imagine very quietly what it'd feel like to lie under it, barefoot, unwashed, eating something you didn't ask for but received anyway. Then the steward coughs. Softly, the breeze ends. You nod. The message is clear. You return along the path. The birds do not sing again. The grass doesn't grow behind you. And the perfume in the air now smells slightly of obligation. The garden will remain perfect, but you will not. You are not supposed to know their names. The men who carve your tomb, chip by chip, are meant to remain faceless hands without histories, shoulders without burdens, voices without gossip. But the walls are thin in some places, and their voices carry when they think no one is near. So you know more than you're meant to. Not much, just enough to feel uncomfortable. One is called Menka. He hums when he works. Always the same tune, low, repetitive, like a song a river might sing if it had lungs. Another is Kawa, who curses under his breath whenever a chisel slips. He thinks he's quiet. He is not. The third, a boy named Tepi, talks constantly, mostly to himself, occasionally to the stone. You don't understand everything he says, but the stone does. Or at least it listens longer than most people. You visit the site rarely. Officially, it's to preserve the mystery. Unofficially, it's because the smell of earth and copper dust clings to you too long afterward, and no amount of cedar oil quite covers it. But today you walk the narrow hall, alone except for one torch-bearer, 2 guards, and the silence that sits just behind the chisel sounds. They don't see you at first. You pause at the edge of the chamber. The walls are still blank in some places, raw limestone, waiting for a story it hasn't been told yet. In other spots, your life is already being carved in elegant contradiction. Battles you never fought, peace you never brokered, gods you only met in ritual, but now appear to be embracing with theatrical sincerity. You hear Tepi whisper, "He must be taller." Menka replies, "The real one is short." A pause, but important. Then more chipping. You step forward, and the noise stops instantly. Tools are lowered. Heads bow. You say nothing. Just observe. The wall shows your coronation a scene lit by celestial rays and unnaturally symmetrical fruit. You never noticed the fruit before. You make a mental note to ask why it's always pomegranates. You probably won't remember. One of the workers glances up. You meet his eyes. Just briefly. His are tired, lined with the colour of too much torchlight and not enough sky. You want to say something. Not royal. Just human. You don't. Instead, you step toward the wall and place your hand on the cool surface beside the chisel marks. The stone doesn't respond. Of course it doesn't, but your fingers feel something. Not a message, not magic. Just a weight of time, paused for a second. You step back. You nod. They bow again. The chisels resume. As you exit, the air tastes stale, like old sweat and yesterday's stories. You wipe your hands. The stone's dust remains in the lines of your palm. Later, someone asks what you saw. You say, "It is progressing well," and you don't mention that. For a moment you saw yourself not in the carving, but in the men doing the carving. The pyramid is almost finished. That's what they tell you, with the same hushed tone they use for funerals and weddings. Almost. A word shaped like promise, but heavy with avoidance. The capstone is ready, gilded, burnished until it reflects the sun too confidently. You've seen it from your chamber, a golden tooth waiting to bite the sky. You do not ask to visit again. You do not have to. The invitation arrives carved into your schedule, approved by 6 priests and confirmed by someone you don't remember appointing. You travel in a closed litter, swaying gently with each footstep of the carriers, the curtains drawn low enough to keep the dust out, but not so low that you cannot see the peak in the distance. It rises like a question no one wants answered. When you arrive, the workers pause. Not out of reverence. Out of calculation. Everyone moves more carefully when a god walks among them. You are not here to bless or to curse. You are here to witness. That is all they allow you now, witnessed wrapped in gold and carried by 12 legs. You walk the perimeter slowly. The guards clear your path before you reach it. Stones line the sides like obedient thoughts. Someone murmurs about alignment with the stars. You nod. You already know. You've known for years. The stars were consulted before you were even born. You climb partway, just enough to feel the incline, to remind yourself that height is not the same as perspective. You stop where the view begins to matter. From here, the Nile looks small. The villages blur. The workers are ants with sunburns. The wind tastes of dust and triumph, unevenly mixed. A scribe reads aloud the planned inscriptions. Your name will appear in 5 places. 1 hidden, 1 central, 1 near the capstone, 2 for redundancy. The spells are long, intricate, and filled with symbols so ancient the priests argue about their meanings even as they carve them. You nod again. You do not correct. Let the argument continue. It's proof someone still cares about the words. You notice, for a moment, that no one mentions what happens after the pyramid is sealed, the tomb filled, the body arranged, the air trapped. You have read the scrolls. You have seen the diagrams. The afterlife is well planned, perfectly itemized, clean, too clean. You turn to the architect, not the main one, just his assistant, too nervous to speak without being spoken to. You ask if the pyramid can be opened, years from now, if someone forgets the ritual. He looks horrified. He says, "It is built not to open, Majesty." You nod once. You already knew the answer, but you needed someone else to say it aloud. On the ride back, you do not draw the curtain. You let the sun glare at you through the slit. You let the dust settle on your sleeve. You do not brush it away. The pyramid stands behind you now, silent, proud, final. But you are still breathing. And that is the one thing the pyramid cannot contain. And now the lights are dim. The fire has dwindled to a hush. The workers' village has quieted, just the sound of a sleeping mat creaking as someone turns in their sleep, just the echo of a cough swallowed by woven walls, just the faint dream of bread rising too slowly in a warm clay oven that remembers more than it reveals. You are not at the pyramid anymore. You are not at the palace. You are not even in the garden where the birds once sang without permission. You are somewhere softer, quieter. Not cleaner, nothing here is ever clean, but softer, in that the air no longer demands answers and the ceiling no longer watches you. Your body remembers things you forgot to feel during the day. The ache in your heel from the rope pull, the stiffness in your shoulder from lying the wrong way on straw, the weight in your chest from names whispered by men who carve stories they do not believe, but carve anyway. That's what days are made of. Friction, repetition, and the gentle violence of survival. And yet, you are still here.